Hello and welcome back to the Double Clutch podcast. I'm one of your usual hosts, Mike Miller, and tonight I am joined once again by Mr. Josh Coyne.
Merry Mamba Day, one and all.
Merry Mamba Day indeed. And for the first time, towards the bottom left of the screen, you'll see the man behind all of this Twitch magic. It's Captain Kirk Killick. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, not bad, guys. Thanks for letting us show my face for once.
I just thought I'd come to you really quickly there, see if you could figure out how to take mute off on the microphone. But well done, you passed the first test. We've got a huge amount of things to go through today. As you can see, Kurt's got some 2K21 stuff up on the screen because the demo dropped today. But before we get into all of that, if you're not already, make sure you are following us at Double Clutch UK on Facebook, Twitter and Insta. We're even there on YouTube under the same handle. And unsurprisingly, you can find us on twitch.tv/Double Clutch UK for everyone who's not watching live now on Twitch. If you aren't watching live, come and watch us live. It's the great accompaniment to the NBA games that are live at the moment. And for those of you who want to get involved in the community and talk basketball all the time, like so many of us do, discord.me/doubleclutch. With that out of the way, we've got loads of NBA action to get into. The Bucks have just literally finished on the big screen above me now, beating the Magic, assuming that I haven't missed anything in the last 30 seconds or so. But we're not going to start there. We're going to start yesterday with the big story. The legend, the growing legend, the living legend that is Luka Doncic. Josh, let's just gush over Luka for the next half an hour.
I mean, what can you say, really? I mean, let me ask you something. I mean, who tweeted these? I've got these up on the screen. Luka, we are not worthy. And then there's another tweet that says, Luka the Don. Who tweeted those tweets, Mike?
Who tweeted those tweets? I'm guessing because you're bringing them up, it's probably someone who's previously not been a Luka fan. You're going to try and outfox things here.
No, it's not. It's not that advanced. It's not that advanced. It's Dwayne Wade and Paul Pierce. Those guys have made some unbelievable shots in their career. They've carried their teams, their respective teams, and become legends for their respective teams. And this guy is 100% on his way to doing exactly that. It's just unbelievable what happened last night, and his ability at his age against that defense, against, at the highest stage possible that isn't the finals. Just unbelievable stuff from Luka Doncic.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, and even more so when you consider he was a game-time decision for his sprained ankle. It's quite mad because I watched the first half live and I thought it was going to be a blowout. So at that point I was like, you know what, I'm going to go get some sleep. And I woke up this morning and I was just like, I really should have stayed up for that. And watched the second half and was just like, you're kidding me. What an incredible comeback. Overtime victory, 135-133 over the Clippers. Series tied at 2-2, 43, 17 and 13 was the stat line for Luka. No Kristaps Porzingis, who I was a little surprised for knee soreness, but he has a history of significant knee injuries. And to win the game in that manner, 3 seconds left on the clock, hitting a step back over Reggie Jackson, who, maybe he was the easier opponent to take on, but that's still a guy with a huge wingspan who contested that shot. What do you expect from Luka going forwards?
Well, he's going to make himself into a legend. I mean, he's already, he's on his way there. A lot of the comparisons that we've been seeing online have been really lofty. Obviously, we're getting a lot of Larry Bird. We're getting a lot of Magic Johnson. We're getting some LeBron in terms of the comparison. For me, he's like James Harden. If James Harden had Larry Bird's unshakable confidence and then LeBron's ability to kind of dictate the flow of a game like a kind of classical music maestro of some sort, an orchestral maestro. He's just absolutely amazing. I think what he's going to do is he's going to cement himself as one of the best players in NBA history and the greatest European player of all time, depending on the progress of Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Certainly, the trajectory is on phenomenal. And just, what made me laugh was the commentary team, Jeff Van Gundy, Mark Jackson, and Mark Jackson was doing his whole, I'm going to ramble for about 2 minutes about nothing that anyone's going to pay attention to sort of thing. And he went along the route of, there used to be this idea that Europeans were soft and rah, 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 but I think that all stopped in 1992 when Tony Kukoc played. And I was just like, 1992? Try 2 years ago, they were like, this guy is not going to be able to hang in the NBA. And not only has he won Rookie of the Year, he's got himself into the conversation for MVP this season. He's beating a team that on paper were a lot of people's favourites to win the NBA title this season in only his second year in the NBA. It's mad. He's like, what, 22?
He's 21, I believe. But Luka, I mean, we spoke about this long before the draft. We were talking about Doncic, and obviously we're always going to veer on the side of away from Euroscepticism for obvious reasons, because we've seen it. We've followed a lot more European players maybe than the average NBA fan, because where we're internationally placed. But we were on the Luka hype train a long time ago, and I remember actually somehow it's quite funny really that I ended up on a Sacramento radio station to basically gush about Luka before the draft, because obviously they had the opportunity to draft him and they didn't. They took Marvin Bagley, okay, and so they didn't listen to me basically. So Vivek, get in touch, but. The amazing thing is just how far ahead of his developmental curve he is. We said at the time that Luka is playing in a league where these guys are being paid, they're professional adult men being paid to clothesline you and rough you up a little bit if you're going to come in as a young star into this league. He won every single available individual and team accolade that got put in front of him before he even touched the NBA. This guy's done it all. He's continuously proven that he's way ahead of everyone else that has appeared to him. And once again, at the absolute highest level of basketball, he continues to do it. I cannot even fathom, if we're saying that the prime of an NBA basketball player is 28, 29, 30, then I can't even fathom, health permitting, the stage and the level that Luka Doncic will be at. Unbelievable.
It's scary, isn't it? I think there's still a lot of, like you said, we were quite early on the bandwagon. There's still a lot of skepticism from Americans about the standard of basketball in Europe. Even the Bill Simmons podcast, which came out this morning, recorded last night, was, he's playing against 30-year-old men, which for a start, 30's not that old in NBA terms. It's literally the end of your peak. Guys who smoke at the end of every game. It's like, hold on a second. They're not on 20 a day. Admittedly,
it gets to the point with people like Simmons sometimes where you can actually guess the beat of the conversation. As soon as he started that point, me and you probably would have been listening and thinking he's going to say the thing about smoking at halftime.
Yeah, I mean, I get that European players like Milos Teodosic, for example, are known smokers. But we've just watched something, and I get it was now 22 years ago. We've watched The Last Dance, where the GOAT is quite often chewing a cigar. It's just like the idea that at this point now there are still players at halftime and after the game just puffing away on packs of cigarettes at the top level in Europe is just obscene to me. Absolutely obscene.
Most basketball, sensible basketball fans know that the level that he was playing at in Spain was far beyond any American prospect playing in the NCAA tournament. And if you think you're literally playing against a bunch of kids who are, their primary objective is to improve their draft stock when they go into the tournament. They're looking for a highlight reel that they can show to NBA organizations when they go in and have their meetings. They're not being paid professionally to outplay you and to physically outmatch you when you're 16, 17 years old. So it's about time that this Euroscepticism was completely out the window. I think Luka's going to play a big part in doing that.
Yeah, I mean, there is a serious potential that the best two players in the league within the next 3 to 4 years are going to be Europeans, which is mad. We had a couple of listener questions about Luka and the Mavs, or this series rather. MJack 216. Can the Mavs realistically beat the Clippers? It's 2-2 now. No one thought it would be this close.
Of course, realistically they can. I still think that I would 100% take the, in my opinion, I'm going to take the Clippers. I think that Kawhi, we've seen Kawhi do this kind of thing at this stage and beyond too many times for two different teams, that are, completely different. And I think that ultimately we're going to see that happen. But obviously, as I'm sure we're going to be speaking about, it will take more than one component in terms of their star team than Mr. Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. A couple of things confused me yesterday. I don't get why the way they set up on that last play was Kawhi on Luka, and I get why they did that in order to, if they hadn't and they'd gone with Reggie straight away, they wouldn't have run the pick and roll to get the switch. But it kind of didn't make sense to me that they switched on defense. Why not hedge, double team, and then send help to cover? I can't remember who it was, roll into the rim. And force someone else with less
Maxi
than 3
Kleber,
seconds
maybe,
on.
I think.
Yeah, it was Maxi rolling into the rim, but then you could send help from the weak side, whatever. You'd leave a guy sort of open in the corner, but wouldn't you rather have... I know they've got some great shooters, but wouldn't you rather have one of the role players rather than the guy who's already dropped 40 and a 40-point triple-double and is capable of these Luka magic moments try and beat you rather than him? It just didn't make sense to me. I still think the Clippers win this series. Wonder what happens in that same situation with someone like Patrick Beverley. That's who I want to see guarding Luka, just to see, because he's such an antagonist. He has just a way of getting under your skin, winding you up, frustrating you, and I want to see how Luka can handle that. What he's done now has been amazing, far beyond expectations. I just want to see that as well.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how he copes against someone like him, because there have been times where even the unshakable LeBron James has reacted or seemed visibly stirred by Beverley. He, of course, mostly goes on to outplay him or like make an insane play to kind of get the upper hand. But Beverley has that ability to shake people and to fluster them. But I mean, at this point, there's no limit to the kind of steadiness of Doncic. So I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't even blink an eye. But it's going to be an amazing couple of games that we're going to see.
Yeah, it is. Another question from UK Nets fans. Where is Paul George?
He's been super underwhelming, hasn't he? Playoff P. There was an amazing tweet. I think it might have been Jason Concepcion, who basically Paul George keeps saying the wrong stuff, and he said that if he had made more shots, then they would have had more points. Basically, he said something like that, and he said hindsight's 3 from 12 or whatever the stat line was in terms of his field goal attempts. But he's been somewhat invisible at times, massively underperformed. George, it seems sometimes, we said this about Boylan in the last podcast, or maybe the one before, that sometimes you do naturally start to feel sorry for people who get piled on, especially in the NBA. I guess it depends on how much of a heart you have. But the Paul George thing is somewhat justified. I mean, he calls himself Playoff P, has done in the past, and he continues to say the wrong stuff when he said that Damian Lillard last year was taking bad shots. And you just got to take that kind of thing on the chin. But I looked at this and I thought, he hasn't shown up really in this situation. I mean, even if you look back at the 2013 playoffs, where everyone remembers it fondly as the time, he really first stood up toe-to-toe against LeBron James, took them to a Game 7. Well, Roy Hibbert led the scoring for that Indiana Pacers team. And there were, I mean, in a really important Game 3, he scored like 14 or 13 points. This isn't a guy, I mean, obviously he's got better and he's a really amazing talent, but these are the moments that define your career and define your legacy. And the reason it's so unbelievably important, let me just get it up here. The reason it's incredibly important for this to pay off for the Clippers, this experiment, this very much win now or nothing experiment for the Clippers, which I loved when it happened, loved the trade, is because, let me go through the outgoing picks that they have. 2020 first round pick to New York. 2021 first round draft pick to New York. 2021 second round draft pick to Charlotte. Then it begins. 2022 first round draft pick to Oklahoma City. 2023, first round draft pick to Oklahoma City, swap. 2024, first round draft pick to Oklahoma City. 2025, first round draft pick to Oklahoma City, swap. 2026, first round draft pick to Oklahoma City. So if you think about the next Celtics trade previously, where they kind of banked on the fact that this was a win now moment for the Nets, it didn't pay off, and then the Celtics reaped the rewards once that era had passed for the Nets. If that happens to this team and it doesn't work out and someone goes elsewhere, then that's going to be an absolute haul for Oklahoma and maybe one of the biggest trade regrets that we've ever seen in NBA history.
Yeah, it's obscene the amount of, I've said obscene a lot already today, the amount they've mortgaged the franchise's future for this opportunity to win now, and even that is a small window of 2-year contracts were signed, and you've got to think that the way as cutthroat as Kawhi's been with dropping teams, he wouldn't hesitate to walk away if this isn't going the way he expected it to. No. Do you think, Paul George, he was top 3 in the MVP conversation last year. I think it was last year. Certainly in the running for Defensive Player of the Year as well. He's had shoulder issues in the past to the point where he missed the first, I want to say 8 weeks of this season with his recovery from shoulder surgery. And he came back and said, I have got new shoulders. Do you think there are lingering injury issues here which are contributing to this 3 for 14, 9 points sort of display?
Yeah, let's not forget there's the leg, obviously. He snapped his leg in half. And those are the kind of injuries where people for the rest of their career and sometimes life are at least thinking about it. The pain comes and goes. Gordon Hayward's talked about this with his ankle, that there are times where he will just feel it more than other times. Maybe last year he'd really got into a good spot, and this year maybe he's paying kind of a later price for it. His shoulders are bad. Those are 3 kind of massive injuries, that you need to look after your body. They're not robots, but it totally could be. And I can't imagine ever. I mean, it's miraculous that guys like this even come back to this level. That's why you also have to kind of be a little bit sympathetic towards George, where you think it's amazing that you're even playing playoff basketball with what you did to your leg and your shoulders, but. Part of me feels as well is that it could even be bothering him more than he's making out because of the price, the heavy, heavy price that the Clippers paid to have him on board. So you never know. I guess we'll never know what's happening in the locker room. We'll never know what's happening in his conversations with the doctors. But it does not look good for the Los Angeles Clippers.
Yep, well, we shall see, because we've only got a couple more, potentially a couple more games in this series to go. So let's move on. For those of you watching on Twitch, as you can see in the background, Kirk is just living the high life playing the Bucks versus Clippers on 2K21 at the minute. We're going to jump in with him in a bit just to sort of see how he's getting on with it and what he thinks of it. But I've managed to hold you back for 18 minutes, which I think is probably a personal record for you, where we haven't mentioned the Boston Celtics. So let's go on to the first round underwhelming 4-0 sweep of the Philadelphia 76ers. Boston outscored Philly by an average of 11.8 points per game. Obviously, Philly were without Ben Simmons, but they just looked the shell of the Eastern Conference powerhouse they are supposed to be. How are you feeling about these Celtics right now?
They look really good, don't they? The team looks amazing, but then part of me has to think, rein it in a little bit, because you played a bit of a depleted and messy Philadelphia 76ers team. I have been listening to this song constantly since the sweep yesterday. I don't know if you can hear it. Anyway,
isn't that the song they play at the end of whenever they win a game? They play it in the arena.
They haven't. And since the sweep, I started kind of to myself. I thought I'd listen to it as a kind of ironic celebration, but it is an absolute banger. So I just haven't stopped. But the Celtics
have you switched the 5 out? Sorry, have you switched the 5 out in your head for bye? 1, 2, 3, 4 by 76ers.
1, 2, 3, 4 by Sixers. Yeah, well, I mean, you're a genius. You're a songwriting genius, so
There
congratulations.
we go.
Mike.
So carry on.
The Celtics look really good, and there are a few reasons that I'm kind of reining it in, and one is a lot of we talked about this series before, and I said that it's going to be kind of death by numbers for the Sixers. They just don't have the roster build to keep up with such a versatile team like the Celtics, who have scoring in most positions and decent defense in at least 4 out of 5 positions. But the way they kind of managed to nullify a very, very dangerous Joel Embiid at times, who had obviously had a really good series for a lot of the time, but they weren't stupid in the way that he quite clearly could physically outmatch Daniel Tice, and I thought they really handled that well. They blitzed him whenever they needed to. The doubles came and went. They got certain guys to match up with him. They sometimes went small and made him run, and then by the time it got to the end of the game, he looked like he was ready for bed. But they looked really good. Kemba came through when it mattered. There was a lot of worry surrounding Kemba heading into the series and what his knee was going to look like, and how much, whether the load management would continue into the playoffs. But he is amazing off screens. He just doesn't miss once he gets around a screen like that. He picks and chooses his times to really assert himself. He'll have heat checks when he feels as though they really need a scoring punch, this team. He facilitates to the rest of the team, and then you see that he's the polar opposite to what was happening last year in terms of encouragement to his teammates. He's really kind of fostered quite the spirit in this Celtics team. And, of course, Jason Tatum is really, really dangerous when it matters, and my boy Jaylen Brown. But, like I said, reining in the expectations, because Boston are about to face a very, very dangerous Toronto Raptors team.
And how confident are you of their chances in that series? Because obviously Hayward is out of the bubble, so that's a key man down. This Raptors team they're scary now, considering they have no superstar. I'm talking like superstar. They don't have one. They are they are a Swiss Army knife, but they don't have a machete. That's a terrible analogy. But how confident are you?
I'm scared from a fan's perspective, but I'm also extremely excited from a general basketball fan's perspective, because they have a lot of similarities in the sense that both good coaches, both really deep rosters, and on a night-to-night basis it can be pretty next man up. But Siakam terrifies me if I'm Boston. Ibaka actually terrifies me. Tends to really, really come up on the boards when it matters against the Boston team, who struggled. As many people started to point out that every single defensive board was a bit of an odyssey for them to actually go out and get it. So it's going to be really interesting against this team. I think there are areas where Toronto brutally outmatches Boston. I think that the size is going to be one. Embiid obviously was one, real threat to Boston, but when it's spread out across the roster and multiple people are getting kind of mismatches, then it's going to be a problem. But I think, like I said, it really solely depends on how big, from an offensive point of view, the people like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Kemba Walker can come up. But you touched upon Gordon Hayward, and there's some talk about Kyle Lowry potentially, his ankle injury being more severe than first reported. So I guess we'll see. There's so many variables going into it, so it's so hard to call.
Yeah, and it's almost difficult to gauge the accuracy of the level this Raptors team are at the minute, because they were playing the Nets, and like the Nets are going to be a whole different animal next year. But right now they're not a team that probably should have been in the playoffs, and that's probably hard to hear if you're a Nets fan, but it's also true. So guys, they've had 100 points from the bench, which is a scary thing. But again, it's the Nets. how far can you take that sort of thing? And it's about who steps up each night. 'Cause you never know whether it's going to be someone like Norman Powell or Fred VanVleet or Siakam, the bigger names going off. It's really difficult one to gauge. But let's go to the Philadelphia 76ers, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Sixers. What's their future look like? Because this is a big off season for them in terms of deciding where the future lies. They put all the chips in last year, bringing in Tobias Harris in the trade. They'd obviously already got Jimmy Butler. This summer they brought in Al Horford. They've got a lot of money lined up over the next few years. In fact, their full roster this year is 17 million less than the roster will be next year, with 4 empty spaces on it. There's an obscene amount of money on the table, and something's got to change.
Yeah, if the initial question was how does the future look, then my answer is probably going to be bleak. The immediate future. I mean, this is the. I think Embiid said previously that Sam Hinkie died for our sins, and everyone kind of appreciated that when he was sacked. In his after his part in the process, the process is at the point where we're seeing it realised, and there's been some really bad moves at the end of the process that have kind of completely hampered the work that was put in that kind of experiment. Horford is someone that gets a lot of flack from Sixers fans. They really don't like him, and his sister's taken a lot of the flack online for it. The Harris contract isn't great. I mean, also respect to Tobias Harris for getting up, but also I really don't think he should have been in that game afterwards, but hell of a hit. But the Harris money is worrying. They've got way too much money on the table. The obvious elephant in the room is always going to be the two that don't match. It's just not going to work. I think you have to get to a point where you have to be realistic. No roster formation around them is going to make this tandem complement each other, Embiid and Simmons. And I think it really is as simple as it's time to move on from one of them. Which one is it going to be? And you watch this series, and even though Simmons has his obvious drawbacks, that like to kind of create memes on Twitter, and health. I mean, he's literally not healthy for this series, so that's worrying. But it has to be Embiid that you trade for me. It just has to be. He's the bigger talent immediately for me, but we've seen enough at this point where he could have proven a lot more than he has, and it's time to move on, maximize your return whilst you can, and build around Simmons for the future. Otherwise, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4 by Sixers.
So yeah, I think you're right. Embiid would be the one to go for me. I don't like the inconsistency and the up and down of his engagement and commitment to the game and to winning. Sometimes he is the best player in the league, but more often than not, he's far from that. And I just don't think you can win with your key, like the central pillar of your team being a centre, essentially, a guy who is not. He can exist in the modern game very well, but he is not what the modern game is about, and I don't think you can win using him that way.
He needs to be someone's KP. I mean, he's obviously a bigger talent than Porzingis. Well, I think so. To someone's Luka. Obviously, very different players, but he needs to be that secondary piece for a contending team. He's such a massive talent. It's such a shame because he has so much promise still. But I think we've got to a point where he's completely disillusioned by it. I mean, part of it would be that he didn't even want to come into the bubble, and he made that abundantly clear. And then there's been talk of him not even coming out of his room whilst in the bubble. He doesn't want to be there. He's a different guy. Some of that will be the fact that there's no fans to kind of do the Hulk Hogan celebrations to. But he said, we referenced this a couple of weeks ago, that he said this on the JJ Reddit podcast, that when they booed him earlier in the year, he got to the point where he doesn't care anymore. He openly said that. And you think that's a man who's become disillusioned by his own fan base. And actually, it seems as though not necessarily mailing it in, because there were times where he really went for it in this series, but I don't think his heart is bleeding blue. I just don't think it's happening anymore, and I think it's time to move on from the Joel Embiid experiment, and it's time to chalk this one up as a failure.
And what about Brett Brown? Surely this is the time to move on from him as well.
Yeah, I thought that some of the things in that game actually stunk of desperation as well, and who can blame him? But the bringing Tobias Harris back into the game when it was done for me was a bit of a Hail Mary. I mean, that's really serious, and I know that he was cleared for a concussion, but I just saw his head bounce 4 times in slow motion on TV. And there was blood across the court. I'm not ready to bring him in until next year. And it did seem as though he was really clamouring for his career at the end. Embiid literally waved off a substitution just before that as well. I'm not sure if you saw that, but Horford had stood up, and Van Gundy brought it up in the broadcast that Horford stood up, he was ready to come on the court, Brown was there with him, Embiid waved it off. He said, no, that's not happening, basically, and Brown accepted it. And this happened in football last year or the year before, where the Chelsea manager, Sarri, went to substitute the goalkeeper off Kepa. And Kepa the keeper, I know you're not a football fan, but his name is Kepa. And
I just thought it was a Midlands accent coming through there.
and he said no, and the keeper just went and sat back down. It reminded me a little bit of that, but obviously it wasn't as big a story. That for me is a point where you're like, okay, I just cannot command the respect of this team or this specific franchise player. So I think it's done. It's time for Brett Brown. It's a shame from Brett Brown as a person. He seems like a good guy. Seems like he really has a passion for the game, and he's obviously struggled through this process for a long time. And he's seen some ugly situations in Philadelphia, seen so many players come and go, and the promised land was playoffs with these stars performing at the best of their ability. Sometimes you can't polish a turd, but the talent that he's had at this point is not a turd, and it's probably time for them to move on, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with Elton Brand as well.
Yeah, it's crazy because last season they were a Kawhi Leonard miracle shot away from the finals, and this season a shadow of that. And they've had injuries and they've been inconsistent, but it does feel with the effort the perception of the effort that the players are putting in, it seems like the locker room's been lost and it's time for something new. Just to twist the knife in the Sixers fans a little bit more, Tobias Harris, $33.5 million this year, 36 next year, 38.5 the year after, and then 41 in 2023-24. Going to be difficult to move off that money for that guy. But let's not bash the Sixers anymore. They're probably feeling a bit down at the minute anyway. Let's do a quick roundup then. So the Jazz and the Nuggets played last night. The 6th-seeded Jazz, who we've lamented for not having any depth at all, don't need it, and they beat the Nuggets to go 3-1 up. And in fact, the Nuggets, who we've praised for being the ultimate depth team, so it doesn't matter anymore. Suddenly they can't do it. This is the first time in NBA history where opponents have hit 50 points on each team. Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell. Wow. Yeah. What is happening in this series?
Well, they've gone completely against our first initial takes on this one, haven't they? They've completely disproven our theories. They look so much better in the last few games, Utah. It's unbelievable. And I just don't know what's happened to Denver. I mean, but a lot of people saying that, you said maybe a matter of minutes ago about your best player being a big. Jokic sometimes makes you feel as though that doesn't apply to him because he's such an amazing passer. He's not an offensive black hole. The ball isn't going into the post and not coming out. Everything ticks through him. But he's kind of prime Al Horford on like another level, like on Nos, if you're in Fast and Furious. The way that he's a key cog to the team. He can be your hub in which the ball goes and you move off him, and plays work around him. He finds open shooters because he's an incredible passer. But maybe his best role is to be... I mean, Jokic is incredible, don't get me wrong. He's incredible. He's going to win a lot of games. But you're looking at that and you're thinking, yeah, Jamal Murray had that amazing game, but they're being massively outplayed here because at times they can't rely on the wings as much as Utah have been in the last couple of games. And it's sometimes a little bit of an ask to say, okay, Jokic, take over the game. When are we going to see that?
Yeah, and it's just... It's very difficult when the second best player, Murray, as great as he's been this series, isn't consistent. And I guess that's like, he has been fantastic and he's gone pound for pound with Mitchell. But I wonder if that disrupts, not knowing what you're going to get night in, night out, whether that disrupts the comfort level of playing alongside him. Like, you don't know what is going to be required from you on each night. I just can't go over Mitchell in this series. 39.5 points per game is what he's averaging. And I think we said after the game one loss, when he scored an absolute ton of points in that as well, I think about, was it 53 or something like that? We said that they could be all right if he continues to put up this kind of monster stat line, but the likelihood of that happening, and the guy's going out there and doing it every night. He's evolved once more from he had a fantastic rookie season, and then in his second season the criticisms came out that he was forcing it, he wasn't able to find his rhythm, he wasn't adjusting to the way that defenses now tried to attack him, knowing that he was the key cog. He's just been phenomenal. I can't find any more superlatives to give this guy. No,
I mean, I've got to attribute it kind of exclusively to our conversation a couple of weeks ago where we said that the creation just isn't there for that Utah team. In the words of Michael Jordan, he took it personally.
Yep, true. And Mike Conley back on the floor, 26 points or something like that, which is not the Mike Conley we've seen all season. And that's a breath of fresh air for the Jazz, who absolutely need him to be the old Mike Conley, the Mike Conley of old, not the old Mike Conley.
Yeah. But when they acquired Mike Conley, I think I might have got really wild with my takes on where they were going to finish in the standings. I thought it was excellent, and it was kind of the perfect complement to someone like Mitchell. I think it works really well. A very, very strange side note. Did you see the picture of Mike Conley and his newborn baby? Congratulations, Mike Conley. But did you see the picture?
I don't think so.
So I know that
it slipped my mind if I have.
I know that it's a thing for new fathers to be shirtless after the delivery of their baby.
Yeah,
but the
skin contact, very big
skin
thing.
to skin contact. Yeah, it became the way the photo was taken. I think it was a selfie, but it looked like he had given birth to the child. You need to look it up. You need to look it up because it's amazing. He's got his shirt off and he's lying down, and I think his wife, who's just given birth, is next to the bed, and it looks like he's done a John Terry, another football reference, sorry, done a John Terry and taken the praise, taken the praise for the work that he hasn't done. So he was taking credit for the birth of a child there, and now he should take a lot of credit for the way he's contributed towards this series.
Fair play. And on that note, shout out to friend of the show Simon Hosanna, who his missus Vicky recently gave birth to twins, boy twins. Twin boys, that's it, twin boys. So congratulations to them. They're safe and sound at home now, and we're watching the NBA last night. So he's getting them started really, really young. Shout out Simon.
Congratulations, Simon.
Yeah, congrats, buddy. Let's jump to the draft lottery now, because that's obviously taken place in the last few days. The Minnesota Timberwolves got the number 1 pick. We had a listener question a week or so ago from Tommy JR. How do you think the pandemic will affect the quality of players drafted this year, and will we see more of a popularity contest than we've seen in recent years, just due to less workouts, etc.?
Well, I think it definitely makes it something of a popularity contest. And we spoke earlier on in this podcast about players building their brand. A lot of it um, will depend on the online momentum and anything that was determined pre-pandemic. The real shame is that the coverage that people usually get from the tournament won't play a part. That's massive. That's when we usually see a lot about the character of these players, which players are able to go above and beyond to win games, and then people really sometimes go on insane runs during the tournament, and it's a huge barometer of what you can expect in a professional environment. So it's a real shame that we haven't got that. But I do think that some people will slip through the cracks for that reason, and then maybe surprise people or be discouraged. But we'll see. It's going to be a really, really strange one, because I think we're going to have our feelers out for more than a year as to what expect from these players as they make their way in the NBA.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm a little bit disheartened if, as much as March Madness allows you to boost your stock, I would be disheartened if you are not being scouted significantly before this period by 29 of the 30 teams. One of the 30 teams, I think it's believable that they wouldn't do anything till then. But the other 29, I think the way that scouting works now, the way that all these, Ball is Life and all these sort of mixtape sites that get hold of high school players and promote them, you must already have a pretty solid document on each guy that you're looking at. I guess it's going to be difficult to gauge how well these guys who are amateurs have been able to stay in shape. Obviously, because of the positions they are in, they may have been able to have a trainer once obviously lockdown or their version of lockdown ended to work out with. But it's going to be interesting to see how many have like atrophied in their skills levels just because of the long layoff. They've not played in over 6 months, and the likelihood is they won't play again until we're looking sort of December time before the season potentially restarts. It's going to be
it's a really good point, but and 100% they should be scouting. Obviously these organisations should be looking at the talent long before the tournament. But like I said, in the tournament, that's when you're really going to get the closest to a very important NBA game than you would elsewhere. I mean, it's far more of a replica of a very, very big NBA game to be in maybe the Elite Eight or the Final Four and to have a good game. So that's the kind of thing that you just can't recreate elsewhere, no matter what your mixtapes look like. You just cannot kind of beat that kind of, oh my God, he did this in this situation and he really came through. But yeah, good point, and it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if it's the impact of it is less so because this year is widely perceived as being weaker. So,
I think there's some things that aren't there that become really fashionable to talk about in the NBA media world. And I think that this might be one of them. I think that it's the easy answer at this point. I mean, we don't have the answer. And there are so many things that we could have witnessed in the last kind of 6 months that could have changed our perception of this class overall. I'm certainly not overwhelmed by anyone in particular from what I've seen. But they haven't had that chance to kind of raise their stock. But then if you think about maybe classes like 2013, I remember every single podcast I'd listened to, every website I would read, and then every clip of footage I would watch to kind of gauge my own idea of these players in 2013. I generally agreed with it. They shat on the 2013 class, and it's the MVP was in that class. The current MVP in 2020 was in that class. Steven Adams was in that class. Victor Oladipo, a franchise player for the Indiana Pacers, he was in that class, and several more. So we cannot ever tell. So I think it's just sometimes a bit irritating for me because it seems like a fashionable thing to say, well, we know that this is a weak class. No, we actually don't. We don't know much at all, and we won't for a long time.
perceived was the word I used, but that's okay.
I'm not having a go at you, Mike. This is pent-up frustration of the last week.
That's okay. Right, we're going to move on. It's Mamba Day today. It is the 24th of the 8th. Kobe would have been 42 yesterday. It's now, 7 and a bit months since he unfortunately passed away. We're going to bring Kirk back in now. He's going to unmute at some point. You back with us, Kirk?
Yep, I'm with you.
Yep. So obviously there's been an outpouring over his loss over the last 48 hours, and lots of sites are recognising him. We did a memorial podcast shortly after his unfortunate death. It still doesn't feel real to me that he's gone. Like, the photos are still so recent and things like that, and he wasn't in the limelight at the time he went. And like, I'm not trying to detract from it at all, but like, in my head, I still haven't come to terms with he's not here, if that makes sense. Josh, you're obviously a lifelong Celtics fan, therefore Kobe was never high on your favourites list. What's your take on the whole situation? How has it changed your view at all, seeing the way that the NBA world and the wider basketball world has shown its appreciation for Kobe and Gigi?
No, it hasn't changed anything, to be honest. It's because part of the reason you dislike these people is because of their greatness. The reason that I ever dreaded coming across Kobe Bryant was quite simple. I mean, he was incredible, and I felt the emotional impact of it as much as a lot of basketball fans. Maybe even more than most non-Lakers, because I had the formative experience of falling in love with basketball, and that included Kobe Bryant, and then especially in 2008, where, you know, that draws you close to someone when you really, really want them to fail so much. So I definitely felt that, and it's been amazing to see how much of an impact he's had. You even see those pictures of Luka Doncic, having that meeting with him, and after a big game of his, and they're just, like you said, just seem so recent. He had such a complicated, dynamic life, of course, but he had an amazing, one-of-a-kind basketball career. He'll be remembered for generations. This isn't a flash-in-the-pan thing. People adored Kobe Bryant, and I think a lot of that's because of how much he poured his heart into that. Dear Basketball isn't fiction, the thing he got an Oscar for. It's not fictional. He absolutely loved the game and poured absolutely everything that he could into the game, and I think a lot of people are endeared by that. I think sometimes, regardless of the outcome, if he hadn't won a single thing, sometimes I think that's what people like about Allen Iverson, is that he left absolutely everything on the court when he could, and I think that a lot of people respect that. It was great to see what we've seen over the last few days. Diana Taurasi obviously wearing the Bryant 8 jersey and putting on a hell of a performance. And then obviously on his 42nd birthday, it was great to see so many people send their messages and their interpersonal interactions. They shared a lot of stories about their interactions with Kobe and what he meant to them. So really sad time to think back at how it ended, but an amazing thing to kind of look back and see the legacy he's left on the game.
A lot of the NBA, the wider basketball fans around the world are genuinely grieving and mourning still, 7 months later. Kirk, how big a role did Kobe play in your life?
It was massive. So I started playing basketball about the same time when he joined. So I started off watching both Shaq and Penny at the beginning in Orlando, and then when Shaq moved over to LA, that's when I really started getting into the LA basketball with Kobe, Shaq, and the multiple rings that come from him. But like, really just what Josh has said over the last couple of days with his birthday, and obviously today, some of the stuff that you read on social media is just outstanding. And what I think people don't see, or if you don't follow basketball enough, is just what he done outside of the court. with all of his like schools, everything that he put into, especially with the WNBA. So for me, it's not just basketball; it's all of the other things that he brought to just life in general. So it was a big loss for me and all Lakers around the world.
Yeah, and you're wearing your Lakers top now, as you can
Yeah.
see on the screen.
Yeah, definitely.
I've played on the same team as Kirk. We played on the same team for a few years, and I'm not going to lie, I've seen Kirk. He wears Kobe's, and at least in 2019, I've seen him turn up in full Lakers Kobe gear to practices. Like, such is the extent of his attachment to Kobe. I love it. I've been like the messages that I've seen, the bits that really have got me are the things like Sabrina Ionescu with the Bryant family, going and staying with them, and Pau Gasol going out and being with the kids, and just that there is, it's not so much that the tweet saying, we miss you, we love you, etc. It's seeing the people who he shared a kinship with and a mutual love still wanting to be involved and help his family during what, there's never going to be a time in their lives where they have to go through something as horrific as they're going through now, having lost a partner or a father and a daughter or a sister. It's just, I can't fathom what they're having to go through, but I love seeing that there are people there for them now, because forget that they're celebrities, they're people behind all of that.
Just to jump on that, I was absolutely moved by the Powell thing as well. I thought it was incredible to see that he's there for the family. And also I think that symbolises when sometimes sport can mean much more than, just sport alone. And it can sometimes form without trying to sound too cliche here, it can form brotherhoods within a team. And that's clear to see. I mean, Uncle Powell, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. It feels this is a really difficult segue to make to what we're going to talk about next, because it is something massively serious, and now we're going to talk about something that is essentially it's a game. We're going to talk about NBA 2K21, which is a huge thing and has honoured Kobe with the Legends edition this year, which we get in two covers for, one for the next generation consoles, one for the current generation, which are pretty epic. We saw them come out in around May time, I want to say. But Kirk, for the last 45-50 minutes, you've just been rocking out on 2K21. I managed to download it earlier, the 30 gigabyte demo, and have a little play around in the 2KU. But you've been actually playing in game. So tell us your experience of playing in the game. How are you enjoying it so far?
So I'll start off with just the way it looks is still what we expect from NBA 2K. It's still slick, it moves quick, and everything just looks superb and shiny and new, which we always want from a new game. But the main thing that they've changed, which I'm struggling to get hold and really work well on, is the shooting. They're still using the stick where you pull down and push forwards, but what you actually can do now is when you actually pull up, you can actually move your shot to the left or the right. So if you do find that your stick is slightly off, you can actually readjust it whilst in midair. So that's something new and good to do, but it's definitely taken a bit to get used to. And then
I found it incredibly sensitive in 2KU when I was trying to do those shots, because you sort of had to, as it came up, if you'd pulled the right stick down slightly one way or the other, it sort of had influenced it, and then trying to compensate for it, it was almost like if you're actually trying to shoot a shot and your elbow's out or in, it was really difficult to get my head around, but really cool concept. Mike Wang, who we interviewed last year, actually tweeted earlier, shooting tip for jumpers: hold right stick down to start a shot. While still holding, adjust the aim by moving the right stick slightly left or right till the tick is centered in the meter. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty self-explanatory when you get there. But this is the bit that lost me. You can also tap LT/L2 or right trigger /R2 to lock the aim and time the shot for an additional boost. So maybe that'll help you in your demo. What else have you been seeing?
Just the dribbling in general has changed, so they're still using the stick, but it just seems a lot more smoother, a lot more clearer to go between just between like crossovers and so on that way. So I'm definitely going to have to go through the 2KU just to learn those new steps and play it that way.
It's the one frustrating thing they've obviously overhauled the dribbling mechanics. One frustrating thing I noticed in the demo straight away, and I haven't had a chance to use yet, is you only get 5 games.
Yes.
Which
yeah, I saw some of that feedback, and it was people were very angry about it.
Because are you getting full games now, or is it just the first quarter?
No, so you get full games, so you can start off making your character and your player, and then you can go off and play with that in the Bucks team, with the LA Clippers. Okay. So at least you get to play around with your man that you make, and then yes, you do only get 5 games. So it's good and bad. It's good because it wants you probably to want to play it more and actually order the game, and it's bad if you do actually just want to have a quick go on it. And I'm guessing that if you stop halfway through it and turn off your console, that's it. You've lost half a game.
Yeah, they're creating the craving that you'll now have to wait until the 4th of September to fix. So there's 4 teams you can play. There's the current Bucks and the current Clippers. There's the all-time Celtics and the Lakers. So you get to play with Kobe straight away on a team that somehow has managed to consider Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I think they're giving him 96 out of 100. Well, out of his 99 rating, and Magic's 99, Kobe's 98, and Shaq's 98. If I'm Kareem, I'd be pissed at that. This is like the greatest scorer in the history of the game. But having the Bucks versus Clippers, that's quite odd, because, and this is weird discussing this with you now, Josh, because obviously about a year ago we were sat in LA doing exactly what Kirk's doing now. It's odd lot to have last season's finals teams. I mean, I get it, but it's just weird. But given how good Toronto have been this year, and this is sort of what I was leading to earlier, do you think this is another example of the Raptors being slighted by the league? You know, the whole conspiracy theory. I
think it's a large part of kind of the excitement around Kawhi for the last year. That's not a sarcastic comment, because he's a fun guy. I think a large part of it is like, okay, should we put like Kawhi in the demo, or should we put the Raptors in the demo? Because, you know, whatever. The Raptors should be in the demo. But like you said, they don't necessarily have the superstar 2K player that people kind of really love to get their hands on. So I can kind of understand it to a degree, but I think you should always have the finals teams in there. But you're right. It's, if you want an anecdotal representation of how crazy the last year or so is, you can compare our situations from last year to when I'll be playing it probably late tonight on my own. So, I mean, it couldn't be any more different from being in downtown LA playing that game with you, and similarly trying to work out the new gameplay features, because I remember us being completely bamboozled by the new increased intense defense that we were really struggling with. But yeah, it's always an exciting time to have a new 2K to play with.
Definitely is. Kirk, final thoughts on the game?
Yeah, it's really good. Nice to actually pick one up this year. I was surprised that they're going to bring it out whilst the season's or the playoffs are still on. So yeah, it's definitely strange. Yeah, that's the world we live in now, isn't it? Yeah, but no, it's really good to play it, and then I'm sure we'll all get it and all have a good game online once it comes out on the 4th. Yep, agree. We're running out of time, so we've done some listener questions, but we're gonna have to hold some till next week, which I hate doing, but otherwise we're gonna run until about 10:30. So we're gonna do one last bit, which is nothing but Nick's nonsense. Fun bit to end on. Kirk, if you want to jump in, you're more than welcome to. Nick, this is one of our usual hosts. Nick, most nights, like most people, I dream about Jeff and Stan Van Gundy as tag team champions in the WWE. Who is the NBA tag team you'd like to see enter the squared circle? So, sorry, go ahead. No. I was going to say we've had suggestions of the Lopez brothers and things like that, which obviously completely scuppered my original one, and I have a very limited knowledge of the WWE. So you go first. So there is no answer that is any better than Boban and Tobias Harris. Much has been said
about their friendship. Obviously, there's that connection. You know, they could work well as a team. And I can see Boban as one of those kind of powerful giants that is so valued in the WWE. They love that kind of thing, the fans, with their long history of the Big Show, Andre the Giant, etc. And then maybe Tobias Harris as a high flyer, but also someone who can definitely take a bump, as he proved yesterday. So Bobby and Toby, that is my answer.
Well, and of course, Boban gave John Wick a decent fight, and John Wick is the ultimate assassin.
He's got the acting chops. He's proven it.
There you go. For me, it was Chris Paul and Steven Adams, because I think Chris Paul is your little instigator. He's going to obviously embellish everything, like a bit like Ric Flair would. Wow, this is the extent of my WWE knowledge coming through. He's also going to be doing all the dirty tricks when he's out of the ring, and then Steven Adams, he's just going to be lethal, like sort of Kevin Nash kind of horrific boots to the face and things. Kirk, do you have much WWE knowledge? You probably have more than I do, but any NBA players you'd like to see in the wrestling ring?
Not a lot, but what I would like to say would be to get someone small, like maybe a Nate Robinson going up against like a Tucko, so you got the height against the small one to run between their legs and sort of bounce off the ropes, swing off the ring, and then a nice uppercut or something like that, or a clothesline.
Or what was it called? A Hurricane Rana?
Hurricane Rana, yep. And,
that would be sick.
Nate
Mysterio Jr.
Nate Mysterio. He's too busy actually boxing. He's going to be boxing in the Mike Tyson undercard. Unbelievable stuff.
Ooh.
Isn't he boxing some YouTuber?
Yeah, one of the Pauls, maybe. I think one of those.
Chris Paul.
Ones. Not Chris Paul, unfortunately. Sorry about that. Sorry to disappoint.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, we'll leave it there for this week. We'll hit those listener questions next week. Thank you to everyone for sending them in. Thanks to everyone who dropped in tonight, for all the follows we've had. On Twitch, we had Broomy. Flying Tortoise came on Twitch last year. Live tweeted us as well last week. That was pretty cool. And then Discord this week, we had Ger Deegan, Scott Sicko, and MJack216. Come and join our Discord. It is a discord.me/doubleclutch. Then Twitch, again, if you're not watching, is twitch.tv/doubleclutchuk. And if you're not following us on social media, please do. All of them, every single one, I'm pretty sure, except the, as Jimmy Butler said, Tickety Tock. Was it Tiki Toki? I don't know. Tiki Toki. It is at Double Clutch UK. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll catch you next week.